I found out exactly what I meant to my family the day they emailed me a contract asking for $142,000. No greeting. No, how have you been? No acknowledgement that they hadn't spoken to me in 6 years. Just a PDF titled Family Contribution Agreement with a bright red circle around the amount, as if I might miss it, as if the only valuable thing about me was the number at the bottom of my bank account. Here's the part that still makes my stomach tighten. They didn't even pretend it was about anything else. I'm Ariana Mercer. I'm 32 years old, a forensic financial analyst in New York City. My entire career is built on catching fraud, deception, and financial manipulation. I've testified in court. I've traced embezzlement rings. I've seen corporate executives lie through million-dollar smiles. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the moment I realized my own family belonged in the same case files I usually investigate. Because that email wasn't a mistake. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't even miscommunication. It was the culmination of 6 years of silence, 6 years of unanswered calls, 6 years of birthdays they pretended I didn't have, 6 years where the only time my name crossed their minds was when they needed money. And now, suddenly, they remembered I existed. Because their failing real estate project needed the exact amount I had scraped together through a decade of work. Here's what hit me hardest. They didn't reach out to reconnect. They reached out to collect. And if that sounds cold to you, let me tell you something even colder. This wasn't the first time. Not even close. Their email was just the final, polished version of a pattern I'd been too willing to excuse for far too long. So before I show you how that night at the Driscoll Hotel destroyed whatever illusion of family I had left, let me take you back to the first sign I should have never ignored. The moment the injustice began. Long before I had the courage to call it what it really was. I was 26, the year the small slights started stacking in ways I refused to name. I had just earned my first real promotion. Forensic Analyst 2. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The product of missed weekends, late-night audits, and a stubborn kind of pride that came from building something on my own. The first thing I did was reach for my phone. I called my father. Once, twice, 9 times, no answer. Not even a text that he'd call me later. I told myself he was busy. Maybe in a meeting, maybe traveling. Maybe anything but indifferent. That was the lie I lived on back then. If I could invent a reason for his silence, then maybe it wasn't rejection. But later that afternoon, during my lunch break, a single swipe on Instagram cracked that illusion clean in half. There they were, my father, Elaine, and Chase, standing under a cascade of gold balloons, a 3-tier cake glowing under filtered light. "Congratulations, Chase," the caption said. "So proud of our boy." It wasn't the celebration that stung. It was the fact that I didn't even know it was happening. Not a call, not a text, not an invitation, nothing. Belonging doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes quietly, like a shoreline pulled back grain by grain. That day was my first real washout. Still, I did what I always did back then. I tried harder. I bought a $600 graduation gift card, wrote a handwritten note that took 3 drafts to get right, and mailed it with tracking. 3 days later, the card was redeemed. No acknowledgement, no photo, no "Thank you, Ariana." Just silence, pretending to be normal. Something shifted in me then. Not loudly, but enough for me to notice the temperature drop. I started saving things without meaning to. Screenshots, bank alerts, delivery confirmations, call logs with timestamps that made my chest ache. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't suspicion. It was self-protection I didn't yet have the courage to name. And still, I refused to see the pattern forming. I kept excusing the gaps, smoothing the edges of their absence, like it was my job to make the relationship functional for all of us. But here's the truth. Patterns don't reveal themselves suddenly. They reveal themselves slowly, then all at once. I didn't know it yet, but those records, the ones I started keeping out of instinct, would one day save me. 14 months passed before I heard from Chase again. 14 months of nothing. No holiday message, no birthday call, no casual, "Hey, Ari, how's New York?" Just silence that felt intentional. Then, out of nowhere, he called, not to reconnect, not to apologize for the graduation incident, not to ask how I was doing. No, he needed $90,700 for what he called a crypto logistics startup, a phrase that sounded suspicious even in 2018. He spoke fast, confident, promising he'd pay me back in 90 days, max. He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I'd be lucky to invest in his brilliance. I wired the money that afternoon. I wish I could say I had a good reason. Truthfully, I just didn't want to lose whatever tiny piece of family I thought I still had. The startup collapsed in 45 days. He never mentioned repayment, never even circled back with a, "Sorry, it didn't work out." The closest I got was a 2-word text months later. "Busy lately." That should have been enough to wake me up. It wasn't, because then Elaine reached out. Her first message to me in over 2 years. She wrote, "Urgent medical tests. Insurance won't cover. Need $19,000. Please help family." Those words, "help family," landed exactly where she aimed them. I transferred the money within 48 hours. 2 weeks later, I opened Instagram and saw her posting photos from a luxury spa resort in Scottsdale. Mineral baths, wine tastings, hashtags like "I'm blessed" and "I'm renewal." Not a hint of medical urgency. Not a whisper of gratitude. The $19,000 had become a weekend of indulgence. 5 years, $28,700. Not a single thank you. Not even a polite emoji. Here's the thing people don't tell you about betrayal. It doesn't arrive in a single dramatic blow. It drips. A demand here. A lie there. A favor unreturned. A silence that grows heavier each time. By the end of those 5 years, the weight of it all sat on my chest like a stone. I kept giving. They kept taking. And the gap between us wasn't just emotional. It was intentional. And then, when the last transfer cleared and the last lie settled, something happened that even I couldn't ignore. Then came the longest silence of all. 6 years. 6 years is a long time to talk to people who never talk back. But that's exactly what I did. It started slowly. An unanswered call here, a missed birthday there. Then it snowballed into something much colder. Something that felt less like forgetfulness and more like policy. I didn't want to admit that yet, so I kept calling. Once a week, then once a month. Then only on the days that mattered. I didn't realize how many times I'd tried until my phone carrier emailed me a usage summary I hadn't asked for. Buried inside was a number that stopped me mid-breath. 213 outgoing calls. 0 returned. That's not distance. That's not busy. That's a choice. The only 2 text messages I received from any of them during those 6 years were requests for money. Short, transactional, stripped of warmth. "Can you help with this bill? Need funds, ASAP." Nothing about how I was doing. Nothing about whether I made it home safe after long shifts. Nothing about whether New York was treating me well. Just invoices disguised as communication. And still, every time my birthday rolled around, I told myself maybe this year would be different. I'd check my phone, refresh my inbox, pretend I wasn't waiting for something I knew deep down wasn't coming. I'd coach myself. You're an adult. You don't need them to remember. But I did. I wanted them to remember something. Anything. about me that didn't involve routing numbers. Holidays were the hardest. I sent gifts every December, always tracked, always signed for. I'd watch the delivery status change from out for delivery to delivered to signature confirmed, and something in my chest would flutter. Hope is a cruel thing when you don't know how to turn it off. And then, nothing. No text, no call, no photo of Chase holding the sweater I picked out carefully, because he once mentioned he liked that color. Just quiet. The kind that feels like a slammed door, even when no one touches it. I kept typing messages I never sent. Paragraphs explaining how much their silence hurt. Drafts asking if we could talk. Even simple hellos. But every time, before I hit send, my thumb hovered, froze, and then dragged the cursor to delete. I knew the outcome. I'd lived it 213 times. People assume abandonment is dramatic. A fight, a betrayal, a moment so sharp it scars you instantly. But mine wasn't like that. Mine was slow, methodical, a quiet, consistent erasure. And one day I woke up and realized I had been the only one trying for 6 straight years. It wasn't a relationship. It was a ritual, one I performed alone. I didn't fully accept it, not then. Acceptance requires a kind of emotional courage I hadn't developed yet. But the truth had settled around me like winter air, undeniable and cold. And just when I finally stopped reaching out, just when the silence became familiar, something broke the pattern. A letter arrived. A letter I never expected. The letter that broke the silence didn't come in an envelope of regret or apology. It came in gold, thick cardstock, gold-embossed lettering, the Mercer family crest pressed into the upper corner as if it still meant something. My name, Ariana Mercer, written in looping calligraphy by someone who probably had no idea I hadn't spoken to my family in 6 years. Inside was an invitation to Gregory Mercer's 63rd birthday gala at the Driscoll Hotel in Austin, one of the oldest, most extravagant hotels in Texas. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the kind of place where appearances aren't just maintained, they're engineered. I stared at the date, the venue, the request for black tie optional. And then my eyes landed on the guest count. 104 invited attendees, 104 people. And suddenly, after 6 silent years, I was one of them. It didn't feel flattering. It felt coordinated. I brought the invitation to work the next day, laid it on my desk like evidence from a crime scene. Noah, the one colleague who knew the broad strokes of my family history, picked it up and whistled softly. They haven't contacted you in half a decade, and now they want you at a gala, he said. That's not a reunion, Ariana. That's leverage. Noah wasn't just a co-worker. He was a senior investigator. He knew how to read motives, the way most people read facial expressions. Let's check something, he said, already pulling up the Harris County Clerk database. Within minutes, the picture sharpened into something far uglier than I'd imagined. 3 lawsuits. Martinez Builders, $122 unpaid. Alta Electrical, $94,000 unpaid. Brightstone Plumbing, $124,000 unpaid. Total, $340 in contractor claims. Then came the development filings. Mercer Development Group was listed as 9 months behind schedule on a luxury townhouse project advertised as Austin's next great address. Except nothing was built. Nothing was moving. Nothing except the debt. And then Noah clicked on the loan documents. A $2 million commercial loan with a balloon clause. Payment extension expires 4 days after the gala. If the project wasn't rescued, the bank could recall the full amount, forcing liquidation. It wasn't just a setback. It was existential. What exactly do they need? I asked, though dread had already answered the question for me. Noah did the math quietly. Somewhere around $150,000, he said. Just enough to buy time with the bank. Just enough to look solvent. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. On my phone, in a budgeting app I updated religiously, my savings balance glowed back at me. $142,000. Almost a perfect match. Too perfect. My invitation wasn't an olive branch. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't love resurfacing after time. It was a ledger line, a financial target, a calculated reach into the one account they could still access, mine. As the reality clicked into place, a cold truth settled over me, quiet and sharp. This wasn't an invitation. It was an extraction plan. When you finally understand someone's intentions, strategy becomes instinct. In the moment I realized the invitation wasn't a reunion, but a financial extraction, something inside me shifted from hurt to calculation. I stopped asking, why now? And started asking, what's their plan? And more importantly, what's mine? My strategy began the same way every major investigation in my career begins, with documentation. If they were expecting the same daughter, who once wired money without question, they were about to meet someone very different. I pulled out a fresh pack of printer paper and began assembling the case file they didn't know they'd built for me. Bank transfers, 8 of them. Emails requesting help with medical bills and urgent family needs. Screenshots of Elaine's Scottsdale spa trip, timestamped 2 days after she claimed she was undergoing tests. Delivery confirmations for holiday packages only the doorman ever acknowledged. 2 text messages from 6 years, the only ones, both asking for money. Then came the call logs, all 213 entries printed, highlighted, sorted chronologically, a visual map of 6 years of silence. By the time I finished, I had a manila folder thick enough to slap down on a boardroom table, the kind of folder that doesn't need emotion to make its point. Next came preparation for the physical confrontation. I stood in front of my closet and reached for the black dress I'd been saving for a better occasion. A simple, clean-lined piece. I bought at an outlet sale for $92. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't loud. It wasn't meant to impress anyone. It was armor, uncomplicated, unpretentious, impossible to weaponize. I packed the folder, then a backup flash drive, then a second backup tucked into my carry-on. Old habits of an analyst who knows that the truth can disappear if you don't anchor it in triplicate. The night before my flight, I called Noah. If you don't hear from me in 48 hours, I told him, send everything to my attorney. He didn't argue, didn't try to talk me out of going. He simply exhaled slowly, the sound of someone who understood exactly what I was walking into. You're not going there to fix them, he said quietly. I know, I replied. I'm going there to confirm the truth. I closed my suitcase with a finality that didn't feel dramatic. It felt overdue. Standing in the doorway of my apartment, lights off, coat zipped, folder in hand, I wasn't the daughter they once manipulated. I wasn't the woman who sent money hoping it might buy affection. I was someone stepping into a fire she had already survived. This time, with her eyes open and her evidence ready. I booked the Uber. I walked toward the airport gate, and I made myself one last promise. I wasn't flying to reunite. I was flying to confirm the truth. The Driscoll ballroom glowed gold the moment I stepped inside. Chandeliers blazing, marble floors polished to a shine, so bright it almost hurt. People in gowns and tuxedos, drifting like they were floating through a curated dream. And then the dream snapped. Elaine appeared in front of me with a smile stretched so wide it almost cracked her face. Oh, you actually came, she said, loud enough for 20 people to hear. Her tone wasn't surprise. It was triumph. Gregory followed, arms out, warmth turned up to theatrical levels. Ariana, my girl. He pulled me in, held my shoulder, angled me just slightly toward a photographer. Flash, another flash, another, his hand gripped too tight, his smile too bright, his eyes empty. Chase arrived next, circling like he was inspecting merchandise. So, Ari, you still in that auditing job? You investing yet? Got anything big going on? Questions aimed like darts, fishing for numbers, fishing for weaknesses. The whole room felt staged. Every laugh, every glance, every welcome back calibrated for the watching crowd. But the real performance began when Gregory guided me away from the ballroom. "Let's talk privately," he murmured. He opened a side door. A small parlor waited, dim lighting, leather chairs, a mahogany table. On the table, a contract, 3 pages. My name typed neatly at the top. "Just a formality," Gregory said. I picked it up. "Non-refundable family contribution. Amount, $142,000. There it was, the price of my existence. I set the papers down. "No," I said. Gregory blinked, like the word was foreign. "No," he repeated. "Correct," I said. "No." Elaine stepped forward, mask slipping. "You owe your father support," she snapped. "You abandoned him," Chase added. "You have no idea what he's been going through." I didn't argue, didn't budge, didn't touch the pen they'd placed beside the contract. "I'm not signing anything." My voice was flat, final. Elaine inhaled sharply, like she'd been waiting for that. Then she smiled. It was small, sharp, triumphant. And she walked, not out of the room, into the ballroom. I followed the moment I heard her raise her voice. "Everyone," she announced, standing where the spotlight hit her perfectly. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but you all deserve to know what's happening." Conversations died, music softened, heads turned. "Ariana refused to help her father," Elaine called out. "She refused a simple request. After abandoning him for 6 years." Gasps, whispers, eyes on me. Gregory stood behind her, face arranged into a pained, fatherly expression. I felt the shift, the turn, the weight of 100 judgments collapsing at once. The narrative had been decided without me. Cold daughter, ungrateful child, embarrassment of the family. But something inside me didn't crack this time. It sharpened. I stepped forward, calm, clear, unmoved. That was the moment, right, there in the heat of the spotlight, when everything inside me aligned. That's when I stopped being the victim and became the witness. The room froze the moment I stepped toward the stage. Dozens of faces, dozens of judgments, dozens of assumptions already nailed down like facts. I walked straight into the spotlight, my pulse steady, my voice clear. "You've heard their version," I said. I picked up the mic. "Now, let me show you mine." A murmur rippled through the ballroom. Confusion, curiosity, the early crackle of something they couldn't yet name. I connected my phone to the projector. The screen behind me flickered to life. Tension thickened instantly. First slide, a wire transfer, $9,700 to Chase Mercer. Date stamped, labeled startup investment, never repaid. Gasps, heads turning toward Chase. Next slide, $19,000 transferred to Elaine for urgent medical testing. Another timestamp, another confirmation. Then the photo, Elaine reclining at a Scottsdale spa, champagne in hand. Caption reading, "To renewal weekend." The room shifted again. Whispers, disbelief, eyes narrowing. I kept going, slide after slide. 8 years of transfers, 8 years of receipts, 8 years of unanswered messages. Then came the call logs, 213 missed calls. All outgoing, all unanswered. People leaned forward, some covering their mouths. And Gregory, once flawless under pressure, blinked hard, sweat collecting at his temples. "Let's continue," I said. The next slide hit like a hammer. 3 lawsuits totaling $340,000. filed by contractors for unpaid invoices. Public record, shown on a 30-foot screen. Investors stiffened. A few stepped backward. One reached for his coat. And then I dropped the bomb, a screenshot of an email from Elaine, accidentally CC'd to a partner account. On the screen, in crisp black text, Ariana's savings should cover most of the gap if we play it right. The room erupted, not loud, but sharp, a collective intake of breath, a dozen unspoken verdicts forming at once. Elaine went pale, white to gray, a person watching her own mask dissolve. Gregory tried to speak, but nothing came out. He looked suddenly smaller, shoulders sinking, facade collapsing under the weight of exposed truth. Investors didn't wait. They began leaving. Quiet, efficient, devastating. Deals unraveling step by step as they walked toward the exit. I let the silence settle, heavy, undeniable. Then I spoke again. Family doesn't ignore you, I said softly, until they need your routing number. And the balance in the room shifted. Not slowly, not subtly, immediately. I was no longer the accused. I was the evidence, the credibility, the voice that had receipts for every word. And they, the ones who tried to script my humiliation, were suddenly exposed, powerless, and painfully visible. Their story had collapsed. Mine had just taken the lead. Silence didn't fall over the ballroom. It cracked, splintered, collapsed. Investors moved first. Not dramatically. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just a quiet, coordinated withdrawal that spoke louder than any confrontation. One man slipped his phone from his pocket, dialing as he walked toward the exit. Another whispered to his wife, already shrugging into his coat. A woman in a navy pantsuit shook her head once, sharp, decisive, and left without touching her drink. Money doesn't run, it evacuates. And here, it was evacuating Gregory Mercer's empire in real time. The failure cascade had begun. Gregory stumbled off the stage, reaching for anyone who would meet his eyes, but no one did. The businessman who once commanded rooms now looked like a man drowning in one. His authority, the carefully curated, relentlessly protected image of the real estate visionary, was dissolving under the projector's glow. "Wait," he called to Gerald Hanlon, one of his longest investors. "Gerald, we can talk." Gerald didn't even slow down. "I don't do business with liars," he said. Not loud, but loud enough. Gregory's face fell. The blow landed harder than anything I could have said. Elaine attempted damage control. She grabbed a napkin, dabbing at imaginary tears, turning to the nearest cluster of guests. "She's twisting everything," she insisted. "She's always been dramatic." A woman cut her off. "If that's true, why did you write that email?" Elaine froze. Her throat worked, but no sound came out. Her performance, the one she'd relied on for decades, had finally failed her. Chase stood behind them, pale and silent. For once, he had nothing slick to say. He looked like a man seeing the ground split under his feet. I stepped down from the stage. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just finished. Gregory intercepted me near the champagne tower. "Ariana," he said, voice trembling with a desperation I had never heard before. "Listen to me." "No," I said. He blinked, as if he'd never heard the word from me until tonight. "We can fix this," he tried again. "You embarrassed me," I said calmly. "And now you're watching the consequences of your own actions." "That's not fair," he sputtered. "You're right," I said. "It's not. But fairness never mattered to you until it cost you money." I reached into my bag and pulled out the contract, the one they'd tried to corner me into signing, the one meant to drain my entire savings and save their collapsing project. Without breaking eye contact, I tore it cleanly in half, then half again, 4 pieces. Gregory's mouth opened in a strangled gasp. You don't get to call me your daughter anymore, I said, placing the torn shreds into his shaking hand. My last name is the only thing you ever valued. And after tonight, even that means nothing. He stared at the pieces like they were evidence of a life he'd just lost. Maybe they were. I turned away. No one stopped me. No one called after me. No one tried to apologize. The Mercer family, so loud in their condemnation minutes earlier, now stood mute, exposed, cornered, undone. I walked through the ballroom doors and felt the air change instantly. Cooler, sharper, honest. Outside, Austin hummed, cars passing, streetlights glowing, music drifting from bars down the block. Life continued, indifferent to the implosion behind me. At the curb, I paused. On my wrist was the gold guest band from the Gala, a symbol of the role they expected me to play. Dutiful daughter, silent wallet, controllable accessory. I pulled it off. The adhesive snapped with a soft, final sound. I dropped it into a trash can beside the hotel steps. A small gesture, but it felt like severing a chain. I didn't look back, not once. People talk about endings like they're final, like the moment you walk away is the last page of the story. But endings aren't endings. Not really. Sometimes they're the first breath after years underwater. Sometimes they're the first clean step after walking miles, carrying someone else's weight. And as I walked into the Austin night, no family, no apologies, no last name worth keeping, I felt the truth settle inside me, warm and certain. My story wasn't ending. It was rebirthing. The morning I became Aria Hayes, the court clerk in Multnomah County didn't even look surprised. Name changes, she told me, happen every day. But for me, it wasn't paperwork. It was rebirth. I signed the petition, paid the filing fee, stood before a judge who asked a few simple questions, and then stamped the order, granting me a new legal identity. Just like that, Ariana Mercer, the daughter who waited for calls that never came, was gone. I walked out of the courthouse into Portland's cool gray air, feeling lighter than I had in years. Next came the clean break. I sold my Denver condo to a young couple expecting their first child, packed what little I owned into 2 suitcases, deleted the email accounts tied to my old life, closed the bank card my family had memorized too well, and then I moved north, toward rain and rivers and a city where no one knew my history. Portland welcomed me quietly, the way cities do when they're used to people starting over. I took a position with a financial firm along the waterfront. Respectable team. Good work. No past shadows. Every time someone said, Aria, I felt my shoulders relax, like my body was learning how to exist without flinching. Then, months later, Chase found a way to send a letter. Not a demand, not manipulation, just remorse. He wrote about growing up shielded from responsibility, about finally working a job where his name meant nothing, and his excuses meant even less. He said he understood now. Too late. But honestly, he asked if I could ever forgive him. I wrote back, brief, clear, kind, and boundaried. I'm glad you're learning, I told him. But healing doesn't require returning to what hurt you. I didn't offer my new number. Didn't invite more contact. Sometimes compassion is distance. As for Gregory and Elaine, their fall wasn't explosive. It was quiet. Contracts dissolved, investors backed away, lawsuits landed. Their reputation shrank until they no longer had one. Eventually, they lost each other too. I didn't celebrate it. Consequences don't need applause. What I gained mattered more. I found friends who texted back. Weekends without dread. A life not built around, waiting for people who never chose me. A sense of peace, so gentle, I didn't recognize it at first. And with it came clarity. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who shows up. So if you're still listening, if any part of my story felt familiar, then hear this. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to protect your heart. You're allowed to choose a life defined by presence, not obligation. And if this story stayed with you, even for a moment, hit subscribe. Every click tells me the work, the honesty, and the truth we fight for matter to someone out there. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening.